We ready? All right. Would the clerk please call the roll?
Ms. Barnes?
Here.
Mr. Bowersox?
Here.
Mr. Garrick?
Here.
Mr. Lewis?
Present.
Mr. Roberts?
Here.
Mr. Smythe? Ms. Stevenson?
Present.
Mayor Pressing?
Here.
Are there any additions to the agenda? What was that? What about any staff reports? Libby? Thanks.
Do have a staff report on your dais, and released today is a draft of the Crystal Lake Neighborhood Plan, and this is starting a review period for public comment. We'll post it on the website and put copies in the library and at the clerk's office. We're setting a public hearing for comment at the Plan Commission meeting of October 9th, and there will also be discussion at the Community Development Commission meeting September 23rd. But the official public hearing for the document will be October 9th. And we've had several months of public engagement leading up to this draft plan, including a workshop and open house at the Previs Nature Center for the neighborhood, as well as a citizen survey and business survey as well. So just wanted to bring this to your attention.
Any questions for Libby? Thanks, Libby. Any other staff members with reports? Okay. Is there a motion for the approval of the minutes for the previous meeting, which is the July 14th meeting?
So moved.
I make a second.
Moved by Lynn, seconded by Dennis. Any discussion? Any corrections? All those in favor?
Aye. Aye.
Opposed? The motion carries. I don't have any cards for public input. Is there anyone who had any public input? Okay. We will move on. Ordinance number 2008-09-106, an ordinance authorizing the lease of certain real estate. This is at 911 North Lincoln Avenue. Libby?
This is the item that was here before you for the public hearing earlier, and as well as the right-of-way dedication at the last meeting. And about a year ago, we actually had the use of TIF funds for the purchase of this property. So this item is for the actual lease agreement, which is attached, and this would allow for Park District use of this property at 911 North Lincoln. This will be an effective expansion of King Park, but will retain ownership by the City of Urbana under the terms of the lease agreement. Any questions?
Any? Dennis?
Libby, is it customary for the city to retain ownership of the property that the Park District owns, or would we expect the Park District to want to buy this piece of property?
We discussed that. I think it's, we do have another part of King Park that's owned by the city, and just made the most sense in terms of the finances of this particular property to retain ownership by the city and to enter into the long-term lease with the Park District. They don't have a problem with that arrangement. They also have leases with the sanitary district. So it made most sense in this case to retain the ownership. Someday in the future, perhaps that may change, but for this, it was seen by both to be the best arrangement.
Thanks.
Brandon?
I just wondered, on the overhead picture there was actually a house standing there, but when I drove by I don't remember seeing a house. I remember being empty, so it's all just cleared to a vacant lot. Okay, thanks.
Any other questions for Libby? Is there a motion?
So, second.
It's been moved by David and seconded by Robert. Oh, moved by Charlie, seconded by Robert. Okay. Any further discussion? All those in favor?
Aye. Aye.
Opposed? The motion carries. Next, we have Traffic Commission items. Ordinance number 2008-08-084, an ordinance amending Schedule H of Section 23-93 of the Urbana Local Traffic Code requiring stop signs at certain intersections. This is Cobble Creek Drive at Amber Lane. Go ahead, Bill.
Just a quick update. Traffic Commission met recently on these matters here, and if there's any questions or further explanation, I'd be happy to go into that. In this case, Cobble Creek is a local street intersecting with Amber Collector Street, and typically we would have those local streets stop. And this is at a T intersection.
Dennis?
I move approval of the ordinance 2008-08-084 and suggest that it be sent to City Council with approval.
Second. Been motion by Dennis, seconded by Lynn. Any questions, discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? The motion carries. Next, we have ordinance number 2, omnibus fashion.
Omnibus B, C, and D here.
Okay.
Ordinance 2008, 08, 06, and 07. Also recommendation approval.
I second that motion.
Okay. B, C, and D in omnibus fashion's been motioned by Charlie and seconded by, what? And seconded by Dennis. Is there any discussion? Brandon?
Bill, I had one thing just to pass on as a comment on Hollywood Alley. If I remember correctly, Hollywood Alley is one way, and there's also an apartment building just south of it on Vine Street that has a drive that's oriented east-west. And I've heard a comment from a resident that I wanted to pass on, that in the past that drive was marked as one way the opposite direction of Hollywood Alley, so that you would go, up that driveway, and then you could connect to Hollywood Alley to go the opposite way. But somehow the resident said that sign has not been there recently, and so it's a little confusing of whether that private drive is two ways or one way. Hollywood Alley is still marked as one way, but the drive is confusing, and so there's been some confusion among residents lately there. So I just passed that on. I support this parking change, obviously, but wanted you to just note that so somebody could look and make sure traffic-wise it's clear.
Okay.
Thanks.
We have a motion by Charlie and a second by Dennis. Any discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? The motion carries. Ordinance number 2008-08-087, an ordinance prohibiting the use of groundwater as a potable water supply by the installation or use of potable water wells or by any other method.
The proposed ordinance you have before you is in response to periodic situations where we have sites that are wanting to be redeveloped within the city that have some contamination beneath the ground, and as a part of getting their no further remediation letters for those sites, institutional controls are requested of the city. There are two forms of institutional controls. That's a groundwater prohibition ordinance for groundwater used as potable water. The other is one that we call a right-of-way agreement, which basically deals with contamination within the right-of-way. We have a couple of sites that we're currently working on that are going to need this ordinance. We felt that at this point in time there's enough of these within the community that it would be prudent to pass an ordinance prohibiting the use of or development of groundwater supplies for use as potable water. It doesn't exclude anything else, just use as potable water, and do it within the corporate limits. We sent a draft of this ordinance out about a month ago to about 100 different developers, engineers, and interested parties, to all of the utilities, and asked for their input. The ordinance can be amended in the future and the only instant I think that we would consider that would be if Illinois American wished to redevelop a well to maintain their well capacity in their north field up off of Lincoln Avenue, and we can amend the ordinance at that point in time. I've ran it through EPA. They have blessed the ordinance in the form that you have before you, and they have also indicated that if we wish to amend it in the future, the only stipulation would be that the area that you wanted to amend out of the ordinance in the future had not been utilized to close out a contaminated site. And in the discussions with the water company, I didn't get definite affirmative, but I would presume they wouldn't want to put a well in an area that had been used as a site remediation limits. So we didn't get very many comments, just a couple from the water company and a couple of developers who had questions, but they weren't really in opposition to the ordinance. We would recommend that you approve the ordinance this evening, forward to the council for approval. Any questions?
Brandon?
Yeah, I had a question, Gail. If you could explain, prior to passage of this, so today, currently, if someone wants to drill a well, a private citizen in Urbana, for potable water, do they need a well drilling permit? Do they have to go through any other steps to be able to do it, or is it kind of a property right that's guaranteed of them?
All wells are required a permit for no matter what use in the state of Illinois. It goes through the Department of Natural Resources and the Illinois EPA. Within our corporate limits, if municipal water is available through Illinois American Water, the resident has to connect to that system, and they cannot drill a well for potable water and cross-connect the two systems within the community. So it's pretty much regulated out where Illinois American Water is available, and they're within the corporate limits now.
Okay, thanks.
Dennis?
So this ordinance does not affect the mile-and-a-half perimeter jurisdictional district that the city has, is that correct?
No, it does not.
It
It's
does
only
not.
within the current corporate, well, it's within the corporate limits, so if we annex something, it would automatically fall
Come in.
within the provisions of this ordinance.
Okay. Thank you.
Robert?
Cisterns that are around?
Any cistern within the corporate limits should not, by law, be interconnected with the potable water supply system, and it will not impact any existing potable water supply wells. Thus, the Illinois American wells up in the North Field would be excluded or exempted from this ordinance. It's wells in the future.
Bill?
Yeah, if I understand the term cistern, usually that's surface or rainwater that's gathered there, not something that's drilled from underground.
No, it's,
So,
a lot of older homes might have those. They're still around.
Yeah.
and that would be fine
Yeah.
for that use.
You can use wells for irrigation or for processed water. You can drill those. They're not excluded by this ordinance either. So it would not exclude geothermal wells for heating and cooling. It does not exclude anything like that.
Dennis?
I would move passage of ordinance number 2008-09-097 to City Council with recommendation of approval.
It's been moved by Dennis and seconded by Robert. Is there any further discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Thank you.
Opposed? The motion carries. Thank you, Gail. Next, we have ordinance number 2008-09-104. I am not dyslexic, really. An ordinance approving two agreements with the Drainage District Number 3 of the Town of St. Joseph regarding detachment of areas from the Drainage District. Go ahead, Bill.
Thank you. First of all, I would just like to introduce to City Council the St. Joe Drainage District is represented by their attorney, Byron Ballback, on the left, and raise your hand, and Lloyd Esri, who's one of the commissioners, one of the three commissioners, and they attend. Happy to have them here tonight. Just as a little background and a history, we have had these discussions with the St. Joe commissioners probably going back at least 5 years ago now. As Urbana has annexed and expanded to the east, and if you would look like in the one attachment B, that kind of gives you a good idea of our corporate limits in comparison and almost coterminous with the St. Joe Drainage District. The area west of Fowler Road, we're almost coterminous. Through the years, St. Joe has had some major projects in installing large diameter storm sewers or tiles, but very recently they were a key player in the city, along with the township and the county, the park district, et cetera, in putting together a very important drainage project in Weaver Park. And that was the detention basin in Weaver Park. That's project's been completed now, and that helps protect flooding that occurred in the Scottswood subdivision, which is just outside our corporate limits. But the mechanism that we used to help fund the local share, we did receive grant money, Community Development Assistance Program money, but we also had a local share, and we used the St. Joe Drainage District as that mechanism to levy, if you will, an assessment for those properties that were benefiting from this improvement. The city receives improvements, the county's received improvements, the Park District has a nice naturalized wetland area, and certainly the residents in Scottswood subdivision have a more protection than they ever had before. But we did know that once that project was completed, that we committed that we'd like to look at the detachment, is the term we use, or basically they would provide, through these agreements, their facilities would come under the City of Urbana jurisdiction and responsibility. Again, Attachment B kind of outlines the facilities, where they are, at least conceptually where they are. We have had our engineering staff TV inspect, check on these facilities, and there is some modest amount of what I would call deferred maintenance. That what we agreed to a few years ago is that we would come in and do the work, and that the drainage district would pay us $30,000 for those for that work, and it's basically some modest amounts of removal of sediment that is built up in the ditch, and there's some modest work like by a head wall, for example. It's things of that sort, nothing very extreme. So before you this evening, there is what's called a master agreement. It outlines in the future how the two entities would cooperate. First of all, when we would annex properties west of Philo Road, they would automatically be detached from the St. Joe and be, and not receive any particular, levies or what have you in the future. Also, the city, as an outlet fee, would agree to pay 40% of the maintenance disbursements in any particular fiscal year to 40% of the annual disbursements for maintenance. Now, the actual area of the St. Joe Drainage District is maybe 65 or so 100 acres. It's a much larger area, than the area just west of Philo Road. But from time to time, in looking over the records, some years they may spend $5,000, $6,000 in work. Some years they may spend $45,000 worth of work. So 40% of our share, for the most part, would not exceed, as in most states, $25,000. Now, there might be in some 10, 20, 50 years from now, there might be a more significant, what I would call not a maintenance project that's necessary. At this point, it's somewhat hard to envision what that would be. Then the drainage district would need to contact us, at least a year and a half to 2 years in advance, talk to us about the project. We would have the ability, an opportunity to review and comment on such plans and what have you, since we would be a major player in funding such a project. But as far as I know, there's no such projects like that, on the horizon. The ditch, for the most part, operates pretty well in draining this east portion of Urbana out to the east and south. We do have copies of the assessment roll. It's about 150 pages, so I spared you including that in the packets. The easements, we have copies of the actual easement documents. Again, if you want to see them, I have them, but again, those are what would be transferred to us, then the rights for us to go on various private properties to maintain the ditches and the tiles that are there. Trying to think if I'm forgetting anything else right now, but I'll answer any questions you might have, or any questions you might have for Byron if there's any legal type questions. Jack Waller and has been working with Byron in coming up with these agreements. Eventually we will file, if this is approved by council, we would get get the appropriate signatures and go to the circuit court and file this. Make it official.
Charlie?
Yeah, quick question, Bill. I assume that essentially when we annex a property, the property taxes from that cover what I guess would be the additional drainage costs and all that, right? So essentially a wash.
Yeah, essentially all the citizens or taxpayers of Urbana, pay for this, just like we would maintain storm sewers or ditches anywhere else in the city, if I'm getting at your question. So yes, as the property is annexed, as they pay property taxes or other utility taxes, what have you, those funds, those revenues that the city received would be, used, and that's formulated. And that's in our public works operations budgets. It's largely, this work is done by our operations division. That's Jim Kelly is the manager, and he has the trucks and equipment and what have you to perform this kind of work.
Charlie?
I'll move ordinance number 2008-9, 104, and 105 in omnibus fashion to council with a recommendation for approval.
Second.
It's been motioned by Charlie, seconded by Lynn. Is there any discussion? Dennis?
Although this is like a very large section of the eastern part of the drainage district, the western part that's not affected by this will continue to operate as it has, and it's not being disbanded, is I guess what my question is. This is not a deconstruction of that drainage district. It's just a removal of part of the responsibility to the city for the western half.
Maybe let me rephrase the question because I'm not clear if I understand it. The west of Philo Road, these facilities are currently owned, operated, maintained by the St. Joe Drainage District. Okay, they would become city responsibility. East of Philo Road would continue to remain under the St. Joe Drainage District's responsibility. Is that? I'm sorry. I said Philo Road. I'm sorry, I'm confusing you guys. Yeah,
Okay.
High Cross Road. Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Is there any other discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? The motion carries. Ordinance number 2008-09-098, an ordinance amending section 3 through 5 and 3 through 60 of the Urbana City Code concerning removal of partially consumed bottles of wine from restaurants.
Oh, did you miss number 9?
No?
Or did you do
Charlie
both?
did them in
Okay,
omnibus
all right.
fashion.
Thanks.
Is this legal, I'm guessing?
Yes, it is. This ordinance would allow people to, people who have dined in an Urbana restaurant to, if they had wine left over with their dinner, it would allow them to remove this open bottle of wine from the restaurant and to transport it home in a motor vehicle, provided that the wine was properly sealed in a tamper-proof container by the restaurant. The purpose of this ordinance is to eliminate an inconsistency between the city code and a new state law that just took effect last year. Under a new Illinois law last year, there's an exception that allows wine to be transported in a motor vehicle as long as it is in a special one-time use sealed container that a licensed restaurant has put it in, and the person has to have a receipt. So this just eliminates an inconsistency and allows people to patronize Urbana restaurants, and if they have leftovers from their dinner, then they can take it without the fear of getting a citation for having liquor in the vehicle.
Charlie?
New definition of a doggy bag. I move to send this to council with a recommendation for approval.
Second.
It's been motioned by Charlie, seconded by Lynn. Is there any discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? That motion carries. Ordinance number 2008-09-099, an ordinance amending section 1531 of the Urbana City Code concerning breaking and entering. Again, legal?
This is just a very slight change to the current ordinance. The ordinance requires a mental state for a criminal activity to occur. And the current ordinance, I think it's because of a word "and" instead of "or," actually requires that the city prove in courts more than one mental state. And it's kind of a burden that we would have to, at a trial, we would have to prove that someone had committed the offense of breaking and entering unlawfully, willfully, and maliciously. And I think probably the intent of the drafter was that we would have to prove one of those instead of all three of them. So it's a very slight change, but it does make a difference in court in terms of being able to prove the elements of the offense.
Lynn?
I'd like to move approval of ordinance number 2008-09099.
Second.
Been motion by Lynn, seconded by Dennis. Is there any discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? That motion carries. Ordinance number 2008-09-100, an ordinance amending section 1533 of the Urbana City Code concerning damage to property.
This ordinance creates a new offense in the city code called negligently damaging city property. Currently, the city code does prohibit intentionally damaging city property. But in the case where it wouldn't be intentional, for example, if it were an automobile collision with a street sign or a light post or something like that, there is no mechanism under the city code to seek restitution for that damage. Because if somebody backs into a light pole in his car, it's virtually impossible to prove that that was intentional, and it probably wasn't intentional. They probably didn't do that on purpose. It was probably just an accident, which could be construed as negligence. So currently, there is no mechanism under the city code where we could do anything about that. If somebody ran off the road and hit a tree or something, for example, and if we were going to try to collect on that, and we were unsuccessful to do that through insurance, we would have to file a small claims action in court to do that. What this ordinance does is it creates this offense of negligently damaging property. So if we had a situation where somebody drove off the roadway and struck a street sign, for example, the police would have the ability to issue a notice to appear on the spot, and we could handle the matter in city court, and we could, under an ordinance violation, we could seek restitution.
Brandon?
Yeah, Kurt, thanks for this. I had one question about it, or maybe something to think about for next week when it comes back, which is the word person, that I guess by in Section A saying that you're only guilty of this offense by damaging property to a person. Obviously, Section B deals with the city, but in the case of person, that doesn't seem to apply to corporations or partnerships or trusts or, you know, Provena Hospital or other legal entities besides just a person. I wondered if it was too narrow or meant to be this way.
I believe it's Chapter 1 of the City Code. There is a large definitions section in Chapter 1 that covers the entire City Code. And under that chapter, and I can get back to you with the exact provision, but I believe there's an all-encompassing definition of a person that would include corporations and associations and other entities. But I can find the exact provision, and I can email that to you if you'd like.
Any other? Charlie?
Move to send this to council with a recommendation for approval.
Second.
It's been motioned by Charlie, seconded by Lynn. Is there any more discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? That motion carries. Ordinance number 2008-09-101, an ordinance amending section 1535 and 1536 of the Urbana City Code concerning criminal trespass to land.
This is another minor adjustment to the code. The offense of criminal trespass is actually two separate ones in the code. That offense is one that requires a mental state. It's not what we call an absolute liability offense, such as walking your dog without a leash. This offense requires that the city prove, in this particular case, knowledge, that we don't want to prosecute people who have inadvertently stepped onto someone else's property without authority. We want to say, we want to make it clear that that trespass is done knowingly. So all this does is take the two sections of the city code where trespass is mentioned, and it simply inserts a mental state requirement to put people on notice that trespass has to be done knowingly and without authority.
Lynn?
I'd like to move ordinance number 2008-09-101 on to council with a recommendation for approval.
Second.
It's been motioned by Lynn and seconded by David. Is there any more discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Sorry. That motion carries. Ordinance number 2008-09-102, an ordinance amending section 1560 of the Urbana City Code concerning disorderly conduct. We have legal again?
Yes, this proposal deletes a provision from the section concerning disorderly conduct concerning the making of annoying telephone calls. Disorderly conduct is kind of it's a very general offense that there's all kinds of ways you can be guilty of disorderly conduct. And under the city code, one of the ways that's listed is that a person can knowingly, with the intent to annoy another, make a telephone call. And this provision is very similar, almost identical to a provision in the disorderly conduct under state law that was ruled to be unconstitutional by the appellate court. And the rationale was that people have a constitutional right to annoy each other.
Oh, how interesting.
So
It happens every day.
it doesn't mean you can make lewd phone calls. It doesn't mean that you can make obscene phone calls, and it doesn't mean that you can make harassing telephone calls. But the court said that you have a First Amendment right to be annoying to other people. So the safest.
Now I know why my kids treat me the way they do.
I got to clarify something, though. For all of you out there in Urbana land that are listening to this, there's still a state statute that prohibits you from making harassing phone calls, and that includes when you make a phone call and then you're told, don't call back here anymore. If you call again, that's harassment, so you can still be charged with that. This is a little bit different.
This is just annoying, and we felt that the best thing would be to eliminate it from the code because we don't want to prosecute people for things that are not crimes, and we don't want to subject the city to any type of problem with citing people for something that people have a right to do, essentially.
Dennis?
I appreciate the change that's being offered, but I read the entire ordinance as it stands, and I was interested to know that one can't spin your wheels and throw dirt up anymore. This is considered to be an offense, which is number 7 of the same section. Throw heedlessly, causedly thrown or discharge any stone, dirt, gravel, or other object by the rapid acceleration of a motor vehicle operated by such a person on any highway in the city of Urbana. How do you nail somebody for that, I wonder?
Well, the police are out there every day, and they see when people are squealing and screeching tires. I didn't add this in here, by the way.
I know you did not.
It's been there, but essentially, the police, when people are trying to do, spin outs and they're trying to do, they call them donuts and things like that. The police officers on patrol are very vigilant, and they can, when they see somebody, trying to squeal in the tires and through rapid acceleration, go through some of these dirt roads or something like that, it can be very obvious. I mean, it's even preceded by the revving of the engine and so forth.
Okay.
So.
Youth stand warned.
Do we have a motion on the table?
No.
I would entertain a motion. Lynn?
I'd like to recommend we move this forward to council, and it's number 2008-09-102.
I second that.
We have a motion by Lynn and a second by Dennis. Is there any further discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? That motion carries. Ordinance number 2008-09-103, an ordinance amending Chapter 15 of the Urbana City Code to prohibit the unlawful possession of cannabis and drug paraphernalia. Legal?
These offenses, they're already violations of Illinois state law. They've been violations for quite a while. And all this ordinance does is to give our police officers an additional tool in their toolbox for dealing with violations that they should encounter. All this does is it gives police officers an additional way to handle a violation of either the cannabis law or drug paraphernalia law. And what it does is it removes these offenses from the Champaign County Circuit Court. So these can now, if this is approved, these can be charged under a city ordinance, and these do not constitute criminal offenses. These are not misdemeanors. These are not felonies. These are ordinance violations, punishable only by the fine that you approve. It prevents people from having to be physically arrested, booked, photographed, fingerprinted, charged, and it does not result in a record being sent to the state police or to the FBI, an arrest record that could carry with someone indefinitely. Even if they're not convicted, a criminal arrest record, just the fact that they're arrested for a criminal offense under Illinois, could still be contained in the FBI's computer and the Illinois State Police computer. So what this does is it just gives officers another means of dealing with violations at what they deem to be a low level, and these can be mediated in city court. I think Assistant Chief Connolly is here tonight, and I think he would have a perspective on this to give you the information from the police department. I wrote the ordinance. It's very close to state law, again, except for the penalties. But I'm sure between the two of us, we could answer any of your questions.
Does Champaign have a similar ordinance?
Champaign has both ordinances. They have an ordinance for prohibiting cannabis possession and also drug paraphernalia possession.
I'd like to add something as well. You know, the real impetus for Urbana Police Department wanting to have something like this is that obviously we're a Big Ten college community, and you know, there's something 45,000 students here, and there are occasions when officers, be they detectives or patrol officers, come in contact with students or people from the community, young people who have, relatively speaking, fairly small amounts of cannabis or paraphernalia on them. Don't get the impression that they still can't be charged in state court, okay, with a criminal offense. But having this ordinance would give the police officers an option in their discretion, it's a fairly minor amount, to charge it as an ordinance violation. And it would facilitate not hanging a drug conviction on the neck of a young person. Right now, all drug offenses, if there's an arrest made, it has to be charged in state. And if you're convicted and you're not offered any sort of diversion program or supervision, you will have a drug conviction on your record, possibly at a fairly young age. So I want to tell you that I wholeheartedly endorse Kurt's work on this ordinance, and I recommend it strongly.
Charlie?
My question is, how are the fine levels? Let's try it that way. How are the fine levels decided on? How do they compare to the state code?
I looked at I believe it's section 118 of the Urbana City Code. You have a minimum fine schedule for certain offenses, and it contains dozens of fines for the offenses that I see regularly in city court. The overwhelming majority of those fines currently are at the level of $135 for the notice to appear. When the officer hands you a notice to appear, it's a fine of $135 to avoid court. You can, in most cases, simply pay this by mail or pay this in person at the city building, and it's almost always $135. But there are several offenses that have higher fines. For example, battery. Battery is a $200 fine. And there's also certain noise violations are $200. So in preparing this ordinance, I had to make a judgment as to what the appropriate minimum fine would be. And because and I made the judgment that basically, for a drug offense, they're avoiding a criminal conviction by allowing this to be disposed in city court. And based on the prevalence of this type of problem, I judged that 200 to be reasonable. It's not higher than a number of other fines for other offenses. So that's where I started. And in terms of state, it depends on the level. It depends on the quantity. There's really two issues with a state charge. The first issue is quantity, and the other issue is whether it's merely possession of cannabis or whether it's something else. For example, if it's distribution, completely different ballpark. But at low levels, these are misdemeanor offenses. And there are state fines, and Pat, I'm not so sure, but I mean, is $1,000 maybe? $1,000 maximum fine in a lot of these cases for the low level. It doesn't mean that they're going to get it, but that's a possibility for this type of an offense. And obviously, the higher you go, the more severe the punishment.
Go ahead.
The other thing I'd like to add, too, is that if you are arrested under criminal cannabis charges and you go to court, in addition to any other fine that you may be required to pay, there frequently, if you're placed on probation, for example, you're going to be drug dropped by your probation officer, most likely. You have to pay for those. And, my experience is $50 to $75 per drug drop. It may be more in Champaign County. Usually you're going to have to pay some drug impact fee. It's just a fee that the court assesses to facilitate the court system. I guess they figure if you have drugs, then you have money to spare. But it can, for a fairly low amount of cannabis, you can end up paying thousands of dollars for the oh, by the way, they're also going to probably make you go to some sort of drug counseling program or at least have a drug eval. So you're going to pay for that if, in fact, you don't find a free one. So there are a number of things that happen in a criminal case that can get quite expensive for anybody who's given a drug charge, not to mention having to hire an attorney.
Go ahead, Dennis. Sorry, Robert.
I had a couple questions about, we speak of cannabis because we have some kind of a tolerance toward cannabis. What about crack cocaine and meth? What's the deal there?
That would not be covered under this ordinance under any stretch or any interpretation. This is not something that's designed to, at this point, to deal with controlled substances. Now, I will tell you that there are many communities that have adopted both the Cannabis Act as well as the Controlled Substances Act. And it would allow officers to also write ordinance violations for certain drug offenses. But now you're getting into a whole other policy decision.
Well, when you say drug paraphernalia.
Well, I would point out that the second ordinance, the drug paraphernalia ordinance, does prohibit the possession of objects that are intended to be used for using drugs. So although, for example, this ordinance does not prohibit cocaine, if you had a pipe,
crack pipe,
that would be prohibited under Section 1567. And in theory, again, since it's a state law violation too, the police officer would have the discretion as to whether to charge the person with a state crime or whether to charge them with a city ordinance. But the actual devices used would be prohibited under 1567.
Brandon?
Yeah, I have a quick question, and maybe maybe Pat Conley, maybe you might be the best person to answer this. The question is, well, first off, I support this. It's something the police have asked for a long time. It's one more tool. It gives the police some options of what to do in these situations, and you can decide not to have so much overhead being forced to go through the state process. So that's all good. My one question is about how you, as one of the leaders in the force, monitor the use of police discretion. I know we want this to be done in a way where there's racial justice, meaning that, when the police decide, well, do we charge this as a state thing or just write them a local ticket? We wouldn't want all the local tickets to go to all the white students on campus, who are from Chicago or something, and then all of the felony and misdemeanor state charges to go to the African-American residents of Urbana, and for there to be some unequal treatment of the citizens versus the students coming in from the outside, because we think, these are students, they're good, upstanding kids, just write them a ticket or something. And so I wonder how you will be collecting some of that data or overseeing it with your fellow officers so that we know that this bigger range of discretion, which I totally support, is a range of discretion that's used in an equitable way. What plans for data gathering or training for officers have you all talked about?
Well, this has been a long time coming, first of all. I mean, we've entertained this from civic groups for years that have presented this to the chief, and quite frankly, what people are ultimately looking for is having the opportunity for the police to address a lot of these low-level, first-time offenses at their lowest level. And as a result of that, the first step in the process is that the police officer himself would determine whether or not there's ever been any prior contact, because if there is, you've already had an opportunity to address this at its lowest level. You chose not to comply with that break, and now it goes to the next level, which is a state charge. So the police themselves will have the ability, by checking records, to determine that, because quite frankly, it's a one-time opportunity for small, minor amounts for those people across the community to get an opportunity to be dealt with so that we could deal with them at their lowest level. If it's a second offense, regardless of whether you're a university student or a professor or a police officer or whomever, the bottom line is it's going to go to a state charge. So, I mean, that's one way. Certainly, the police department also has supervision at various levels, as you know, from the duty supervisor to the people approving the reports to the people that are collecting statistics at the end of the month and at the end of the year. So there's a check and balance that hopefully we'll be able to identify it. But quite frankly, I think the discretion on the part of the police isn't one that a street supervisor can monitor on a daily basis. It's one that we're going to have to oversee and check and ensure that things are being handled properly.
Okay, yeah, that makes a lot of sense.
It's a very difficult question. I understand where you're going, but it's just not an answer that I can give you with a specific response.
Well, in that kind of, making some sort of policy like it's one strike or one chance and then you're out kind of thing, and you know that community-wide you're applying that rule. But okay, if it is a first-time offense below a certain amount, everybody, no matter what part of this community you're from, is going to go through our process with the smaller fine. And then the time number 2, whoever you are from any part of the community, we're going to be fair to you and send you to booking. I think that kind of policy would help as guidance to officers, just so that across all the beats, across our whole community, everybody gets their chance and everybody gets progressive enforcement of the law. So, thanks.
Go ahead.
I wanted to address that, Alderman, as well. I've heard this concern expressed before in other quarters, and it's a bitter irony to me. I've spent a fair amount of time as a prosecutor in criminal courts, and I have to say that across the board I've come in contact with defendants of all ethnicities, and there's nothing sadder for, no matter what your race, to come into a criminal court and be handed a conviction for something and you're 17, you're 18, and you haven't even begun life yet. You don't even know what's out there and available to you, and now you've got a drug charge, however minor it may be, around your neck. It affects employment, Sometimes it can affect what schools you can go to. It can affect your driving privileges. I mean, it has such an impact. So the irony is, I've heard this concern expressed about, would an ordinance like this be used in a discriminatory manner? But in essence, it can avoid some of that, some of the judicial, some of the discrimination that can occur in the court systems, okay? And what this does is, I'm not saying that that's the purpose for it, that we're trying to right some social injustice. What I'm saying is that the irony is that this is better than what now presently exists. Right now, if an officer stops a young man, be he a young low-income African-American man or, you know, a white Urbana high school student, if there's drugs involved, he makes an arrest. It goes to the state court, it goes to the state's attorney's office. And then we lose control of it. We have nothing else we can offer. So I felt compelled, because I have a lot of experience in this, that I needed to address that and say that I believe that this ordinance provides a tool so that we can avoid hanging convictions around people who may be deserving of a second chance.
Yeah, just as a response, I completely agree, and that's why I support this. And I think that's exactly right, that's exactly the intent, and we just have to make sure we use it in a fair way to give everybody that opportunity.
I agree with that.
Thanks.
Charlie, and then Dennis.
Minor thing, there's, I think, a typo in the spelling of marijuana, and
Kishash.
I think there's a J there.
That's not how I spell it, but I took that from the Illinois compiled statutes
Is that how
just
they
to be
spell it
consistent.
there?
That's how it's done in the statute. I just wanted to make this mirror that.
Okay. Not how I used to spell it. I move to send this to council with a recommendation for approval.
Second.
It's been motioned by Charlie and seconded by David. Is there any more discussion? Dennis?
Yeah, I just had maybe two things. Partly in thinking about what Brandon said, which was a good point about the fairness. Of course, we expect, you know, the process to actually be even across the board. Here in Urbana, we pride ourselves with being fair as much as we can. I just wanted to remind everybody that we do have in place a system whereby a resident, if they feel they've been unjustly taxed with a violation, or they have some complaint or disagreement about the procedure that they've encountered, we do have a citizen police review board that can help in those kinds of instances where there is a disagreement about what happened and why. And I think that it's a fallback, probably a last place you want to go, but it's still a fallback for a feeling of an opportunity to have your time and your case reviewed by a citizen review as well. Secondly, I think this is very good. It's very good to try to handle small incremental misdeeds by the community, no matter what the age. In a first-time experience locally, I think it is too severe. And we've had, really, the country has had severe drug laws for, 35 years. Finally, people are taking a slightly more realistic point of view. Possession of a plant of marijuana is certainly a lot less dangerous to the community than, selling crack out of your house. And I think we should realize that. In the East Urbana neighborhood, we've had an experience, in this area where a person was facing, a public, some prosecution, and it was an extremely minor amount, a very small, minute amount, and there were questions about it, and the irony is that this individual did go to the state and had to take, some remedial guidance counseling, and it could have been avoided, and he just missed the opportunity by a couple months. But it came to my mind that certainly another way of handling brushes with injustice should be available to citizens of Urbana. So finally, it looks like in this case, it's going to happen.
Is there any more discussion? We have a motion by Charlie and a second by David. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? That motion carries. Next, we have,
Madam Chairwoman, can I just say one thing before we move on? I just wanted to publicly commend Kurt in front of all of you all. Kurt's done a tremendous job in the last year, and he has an impeccable attention to detail. And all of the changes that you note here that were made with these ordinances, Kurt found and brought to my attention because he pays attention and he wants to make sure that what we have in our code of ordinances is current and correct and comports with state law. And I just wanted you all to know that he's doing an excellent job in his position.
We dig it.
Kurt. Next, we have discussion on the cost and benefits of the Sister City program. We have the mayor.
Yes, Liz Davis, I asked to go over if there'd be any additional cost. We got a request to have a sister city in Brazil, and everybody should practice saying Piracicaba. Piracicaba. And, we did get rejected by one Chinese city, but we'll get over it. And so far, we have one sister city in Africa. And when we first got started on this whole discussion, we talked about having one on every continent. So anyway, Liz did a great job. So Liz, would you like to summarize what you found?
Well, the short answer is that there is no cost. The mayor asked to do a cost-benefit analysis, and we will not incur any additional costs if we do add Piracicaba. The fee that we paid back earlier this year was a membership fee to Sister Cities International, and that covers our cost for a year. So we can add as many sister cities as we want to under that one fee, and that will next year be $510. The only way that will increase is if in the next decennial census our population goes over 50,000 people. And then our fee will go up about $100 to a little over $600, but that's it. So we can add Piracicaba for no additional cost to the city.
Okay, there is time involved in this, and Dennis has been the champion for Zamba, Malawi, and I think Charlie's willing to be the champion for Piracicaba. So this is just the beginning, and we would like to make connections with the schools and other civic organizations. And I think we in this country really know very little about everything south of us, and it would be good to have a sister city in Brazil. So,
is there any more discussion?
Maybe somebody might want to make a motion, I suppose.
Charlie?
We can't.
Well, at this point, I've started discussions with some people on campus about it, but I'd actually like to sit down with Dennis and mirror some of the stuff that he's been doing in Piracicaba. He's laid a lot of groundwork there, so if we're going to do this, I'd like to reach all sectors of that community in much the same way. So I'd like to talk more with Dennis about how to make this really work. I remember we had a Tartu Estonia one many years ago, and that one sort of faded away. And I don't think it's useful if we start in for a year or two and then have these things fade away. So I'd like to get something going. But I don't know what kind of if somebody wants to make a motion, I feel. Okay.
Second.
Yeah.
It's been motioned by Robert and second by Lynn to proceed with the sister city with Piracicaba, Brazil. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? That motion carries. And we have a discussion on city council goals.
Okay.
Mayor and Charlie Smythe.
Charlie wanted to do an update on the goals, and I will say that the staff at the last few meetings, we've gone over the goals, and I want to thank Libby for keeping up with this and getting all these multiple colors. We can't have any more goals because we're running out of ink here, different colors of ink. But I think we've come a long way, and Charlie will give you an overview.
Okay, just the idea here being just to catch us up, I'd like to thank staff, all of staff, for having incorporated these goals into their thinking these past 3 years, because we would not have the success we've had today without their help and in helping put the summaries all together. As you may recall, there were 13 goals in our original. We added one early on after some initial feedback. Those goals were begun in 2005 as a method for us to work with the mayor and staff to proceed with some common goals. The staff comments and work plan were incorporated into these goals in December of 2005. We recognize that departments had their own work plans and goals and timing related to day-to-day city operations and so on, but these goals served as a guide and supplement to some of those to some of their own work. There are certain city council members that are associated with goals and or sub-goals. I'm not going to go into those. If people are interested, they can look at the large document on the web. One of the ideas we had was, though, that this would be an iterative process with future goal setting and evaluation. So far, we've had sort of roughly 6 reviews, sort of informally. We've never had a really formal one. This one isn't really all that formal either. But the goal was better planning and anticipation of city needs, and I think we've probably succeeded there. We did have sort of 3 tiers in our thinking. The first tier that were fairly important, the 5 were issues related to public safety, strengthening economic development, creating a vibrant downtown, preserving neighborhood, and implementing the 2005 comprehensive plan. I'll tackle those. And what I'm going to do here is just touch on just the highlights of particular points. And the black is a little glary there. In terms of promoting public safety, one of the first goals was to make sure that we provide police and fire service at levels needed for all neighborhoods. One of the first things we did as a new council was to begin hiring some additional police officers. We got to 55 police officers over a 2-year period. We hired 5 new officers. We didn't hire 55 new. That's probably a poor way to word that there. We got to the level of 55 police officers. We were able to, with those additional officers, move to a 5-beat system and get the street crimes unit restarted. Fire department has also been doing some planning. Currently, we're at adequate levels, but if we continue to grow, we'll need to be thinking in terms of moving or adding a station to provide proper coverage. We had a goal of getting a police review oversight board of some kind that was both effective, professional, and wouldn't cost us too much. And we now have an operational civilian review board in place that's trained, and I don't know if they've actually had a case, but they're trained and ready to go should something arise. We also wanted to establish ordinances appropriate. We wanted to establish appropriate ordinances to strengthen the city's ability to maintain safe environments, and we passed we expanded our rental registration program to include 1 and 2 unit rental properties, and we did what I think staff did a really nice job on revising the property maintenance code, and I've got some stuff to show on the effects of that here later. In terms of economic development, I think we've probably done a great deal of good positive work here, building on work of past councils and such. We tackled Filer Road as a major issue. We've got an action plan. Beautification is in progress. We've got approval of streetscape, and I think a budget set for that. Chris Creek's developments on both sides of what will be Florida Extended are coming along. Walgreens has a new outbuilding. County Market and related facade improvements are completed or planned. We have New Meyer. We have the Pines. Carl and Christie Clinics are located on Windsor Road now. We've got street improvements that have that have occurred, and more are coming, and we've got some new housing and remodeling occurring in that entire quadrant, really, of the city. General business development along Cunningham Avenue, including beautification there. We're working on a final draft of streetscape. We've got 5 Points East completed, and 5 Points West is in progress following the relocation of O'Brien's to the interstate. Staff is also now up to the level of making 50 retention visits per year. They've got a slightly beefed up economic development staff, and that staff is beginning to show its talents. So here's some of what we've got going. The top left is Chris Creek's replacement of Kmart with apartments behind and an office building in front. Walgreens has its outbuilding. On the bottom, you have two different views of the Pines from the corner and further down the street. Now, you have to apologize. I'm in a moving vehicle taking most of these. I just wanted to get quick shots. Meijer is almost ready to open. The gas station is open. You've got Christie Clinic up on the right, Carl on the lower left, and we have the Menards project in planning. That'll be a big ticket 300-acre development that we're anxiously awaiting. Something we don't really think about too much, though I see these every day, are the Gregory 1 and 2 buildings right in campus. These are opportunities for development with the university that help our tax base and help recover some of the tax base lost to university expansion. We also have two new projects on University Avenue, one that's coming along very quickly, and the other one which we have approved and then modified very recently. Our third goal was to create an energetic, vibrant downtown that provides needed services to the city. I think this is a goal we've moved fairly slowly on. There are a lot of issues here. It's very complicated. We talked about it reestablishing the Downtown Commission to propose annual action plans. Instead, though, we have a very functional Urbana Business Association that may be taking the place of this. We want to create and implement some redevelopment plans for key segments of downtown, and we've got the Boneyard Creek plans as well. So staff is currently working on reevaluating the downtown plan, trying to incorporate in a grand vision the Boneyard Master Plan, the Bicycle Master Plan, the parking study, which we're anxiously awaiting, Broadway Streetscape, and several redevelopment projects that are potentials. So like I said, the UBA may be our downtown commission that we'll have to continue thinking about. We have established a gallery district. We have some public wireless. We've added a festival and expanded some of our other festivals as well. The farmers market is doing extremely well. We have public wireless in the library, and we have a new fiber upgrade that's well along in progress. Lincoln Square business expansion is slowly moving forward, but is maybe getting moving a little faster now with Common Ground opening last weekend. A piano bar opened several weeks ago. There's several new shops in there. We also have some additional restaurants in the downtown area that are open or planned. The IMC has rehabbed the post office. Cinema Gallery is cranking along. Gabe's building across the street from Cinema Gallery it looks like it's fully rented downstairs, and there's an engineering firm in the second, third floors of the building where Crane Alley is a restaurant on the first floor. So we have Common Ground open in Lincoln Square. There's a couple of restaurants in the food court. Upper left there is Le Gourmandais Bistro next to Crane Alley, another eating establishment there. So these buildings are nicely occupied. We have our own Starbucks now on the corner of Vine and Main. And we even have an interesting new business right on the edge of downtown next to Strawberry Fields, the Close-Knit, belonging to Brigida Pica. Our fourth major goal was to preserve neighborhoods and promote rental safety. We had a goal of developing some conservation districts for historic and sensitive areas, look at some design review and guidelines, and we passed a neighborhood conservation district ordinance and some design guidelines for the Busey Corridor are at the Plan Commission level. We've got an interim historic preservation planner on staff now. We have a Royer Arts and Architecture District, and we've passed our first major historic designation, the 800 West block of Main Street. Along the same lines, we've expanded our code enforcement, particularly for rentals, reflecting the rental registration program, and so we've got a second housing inspector, and revisions to the property maintenance code are being enforced. A review of the rental registration program is upcoming. We had asked for an 18-month review, so that will be coming from staff soon. We talked about some rebuild Urbana type programs. We've had some initial discussions there about how to get some incentives to do maintenance and in target areas and such. And we do have some programs currently through CD, but we've talked about some additional paint programs and such, but nothing really new there to date. I guess currently they're looking at an assistance program through Community Development Corporation, so they get some kind of a loan guarantee. But here's an example of about 2 years ago I took these pictures, and the roundhouse there was on Busey Avenue at Illinois Street, sort of tucked away. Nobody knew about it. You'd end up with ruts in people's driveways and stuff like the lower left, and garbage cans were overflowing. Yesterday I went back and visited. I found the two sites, and you can see that there's grass that's a little better taken care of in the lower left. The building was finally completed, upper left, and after sitting, for like 10 years or something like that. And though we still have garbage cans that sit out in the open, I know this is something Champaign is looking at right now, and we may want to discuss, but they're not overflowing. They are, for the most part, well taken care of, and this building is being rehabbed a bit there with some new siding and insulation. So I got 2 for 1 there. I couldn't find the other 2 trash cans because they're gone from that other site. So that was a good thing to see. With respect to the comprehensive plan, we've made some text amendments. We have a new billboard ordinance. We've got a level of demolition review completed. Busey Corridor design guidelines and East Urbana zoning review are in progress with the Plan Commission. So some things going on there, though we have not tackled an overall zoning ordinance rewrite. That's something we may want to come back and talk about. We also talked about including the use of design guidelines and such, modern sign and lighting standards, traditional neighborhood development standards, and so on, so that we could better control some development patterns so that they were compatible with the existing uses. We do have a design guideline in place for the 130 corridor. We've got some updated lighting standards and improved sign regulations in progress with staff. I think that's something we can look forward to. In the second tier, we had issues related to recycling and waste reduction, promoting diversity and non-discrimination in city practices, increasing affordable housing, program to get Urbana bicycling, and to create a public arts program. In terms of expanded recycling and such, we've tackled it as a sustainability effort. A report has been done by staff with input from us, and that has in turn led to the formation of a sustainability commission that will be meeting in mid-September. Looking forward to see what recommendations they have. We talked about implementing some downtown recycling. There was a pilot project planned for April. I don't know if anything has come from that. Bill, I'm just curious, do we have anything back on that yet? Did that pilot program ever get going? Yes, it's going. Okay. So sometime it'd be nice to get some background on that. We do have full-blown alkaline and rechargeable battery recycling established with 5 major drop-offs around town. Construction debris would be a great thing to be able to do is a great target for waste reduction, but It's a little bit difficult to do. State requirements and quantities remain an issue. Right now, the people that take it are quite a ways away from the city. It's I think about 75 miles to a location where they can process some of these things. Another item to keep on top of. In terms of hazardous waste collection, we've had one event. I don't know when we'll have another one. We usually get those every 3-4 years in town here through the state EPA, and we did pass our clean air ordinance. In terms of diversity and non-discrimination in hiring, we've expanded recruitment and outreach efforts. We went through and improved our contractor selection procedures and review to make sure that we've got diversity there. And in terms of public services and code enforcement, we've got a new human relations officer hired, personnel manager shift in position as well, working together on improving affirmative action and diversity planning. In the area of affordable housing, one of our goals was to set up a model neighborhood, and that's the Kerr Street Development Project, which is now phase 2, and we should be hearing back on developer selection shortly. I don't know where. Libby, do you have a date on where you might hear back on who's going to do what? Within the next month? Okay. Okay. And of course, last week we approved the replacement housing for Lakeside Terrace, which has been long coming with the Brinshore Development, the Homestead Corporation, and the Crystal View Town Home Project. And then in terms of, we continue to look for accessible, energy efficient, and affordable housing. Our method of doing that is through the CD Annual Action Plan, which we adopt on a regular basis. Getting Urbana bicycling, I think, has been a considerable success. We created a bicycle and pedestrian advisory committee with the goal of seeking a bicycle-friendly community status within 5 years. The commission led to a bicycle master plan that was adopted by council earlier this year and incorporated into the capital improvement plan. And staff and council continued to implement some of the bike committee recommendations for routes, regional connections, bike maps, and so on. And in fact, we did get a bike map out this year working with Champaign County Bikes. Goodwin Avenue has a very large safety grant awarded to it to turn that into a pedestrian and bicycle friendly corridor on campus. Hopefully that construction should begin next year, right? Yeah. And in a similar fashion, we've applied for a grant to do Main Street in a very similar way that would get us a major bike route east-west through downtown. We're also keeping an eye on developing a regional trail to Danville that would include historic sites and historic Lincoln sites in Urbana. Just to get to let you know where we are on that. Rails to Trails negotiations is being managed by the Champaign County Development Corporation, CCDC, and with the trail to become part of the County Forest Preserve system should they be successful with their negotiations with CSX. Money is the big issue there. We also are interested in having a local trail between Carl and downtown to better connect the Carl Hospital campus in with downtown, and there's a design work on a bikeway that's ongoing. We also have a 130 corridor bike trail that's planned, and we have a state award for that, right? I believe, yeah. And expanded bike lanes to some extent already exist and will continue to be connected as Windsor Road goes to 4 lanes. Public arts program, that was another recent success. We had a public arts task force that was appointed last year, led to a report. It's turned into an ordinance, budget, public arts commission, full-blown, and they will also be meeting this month as well for the first time. We're also interested in preservation and commemoration of local and multicultural traditions and histories, and Dennis has been a great champion of this, getting us a 175th birthday celebration, complete with calendar over a 13-month period, and I believe also leads into the planning for the Lincoln Bicentennial. We've also got a request in to the Historic Preservation Commission to look at a historic marker program. There were some sub-parts of the public arts program of integrating art into public works projects where possible, and different goals for the public arts. And I think the city ordinance establishing the commission includes these components as well. There were 4 internal goals, which I'll just touch on real quickly, which was to recruit and retain top quality staff. We have a wonderful staff. We got to see many of them tonight, actually. And a review of city code was requested as well, along with handling city council business efficiently. And if I get done before 8:30, I'll think maybe I'll be successful there too. And finally, the goal that we added was, after some initial comment, was encouraging intergovernmental cooperation. And so with recruiting, we have longevity benefits that have been established. We have a salary study that's completed, but additional studies are going to be undertaken. We've hired internally for 3 major positions of police chief, fire chief, and personnel manager. A review of city code, Jack Waller's been touching on that chapter by chapter, and I guess Kurt must be reading it very carefully, cleaning it up. And I believe that the mayor has been reviewing and updating policies as she gets input from department heads and city employees. In terms of the city council business, we have improved audio, we have a phone-in circuit, we have better video monitors, mics, and usually we have sufficient seating. And occasionally we even get 3 chairs up here when we need them. So we have very nicely coordinated vacation schedules this year, especially. We've done a pretty good job there. I hope everybody enjoyed their break. I did. And I think our meetings run a lot more efficiently than the council I remember being on 20 years ago, when where every meeting ended after 10 o'clock. So and we'll end by 8:30 tonight. On the last item, the intergovernmental cooperation, I think people don't realize how much we do intergovernmentally with the university in terms of police, fire. We have regular transportation discussions, CATS 3 and CUATS meetings and so on. We are interested in tax-based enhancements with the university, and things like Orchard Downs, pomology discussions are ongoing. In terms of other intergovernmental things, we work very closely with the county. We have Illinois 130 grant. Big Small All was completed. We have the Scottswood drainage issues that were very successfully brought forward, and we saw another piece of that tonight. We have various TIF agreements, and we continue with Build Urbana at least through this year. Utilities and franchise agreements, we work very closely with all of the other local governments. We've gone in with them on the water company audits, intervention issues. Cable franchise renewal is a big project that we're all involved with each other. And again, the Ameren rate case, we intervened as a joint group. And then we have the Sister City program we looked at and got rejected by China. We've established a relationship with Malawi, and now we're looking at something in Brazil as well. So that's the 14 goals in a nutshell. Like I said, the details are in the large document that was passed out. But a couple of things that come to mind here. There are a couple of things we need to come back. There's some downtown planning. If we can get that grand vision, that's an important one. A little more recycling. I'd like to see a little more there. In terms of our own staffing, I'm looking forward to getting a new administrative officer hired and familiarized, because then we can probably work on tuning and adjusting and setting priorities on the remaining items in this list. We can talk about adding items as time permits. I know Dennis has some additional things that are of interest, and we probably could also start planning to schedule sessions with staff to work on some revisions either later this year or early next year. So that's what I put together.
Lynn?
Charlie, would you mind taking credit for the authorship and allowing us then to maybe send this out to our constituents if you thought it was appropriate?
This is a document, put together by the mayor and us and staff, and I think it already is on the city webpage. So.
This.
This presentation. Sure.
Well, it's
Yeah.
succinct.
Okay.
It's, people can whip through it. It's PowerPoint.
Okay, sure.
It's a little more,
Let
not that.
me clean it up just a little bit, and I will put it on my website.
I don't know, would others use it if you had access to it?
Oh, sure. I'm sorry, what? Yeah, okay. Yeah, a lot fewer colors, yes, than the other document. I do put up a link to the master one that Libby sends forth on my website, and I'll put this on there and send everybody the link.
Thank you.
But my question is there are some ideas for fine tuning this and setting some priorities. Do we want to schedule a caucus session for early October?
I think that'd be a good idea.
Yeah.
And
Okay.
and then during there, we would talk kind of about beginning to set some priorities for just the
Right, for
next
what's
year.
left over and anything that's missing that we think we can get done. Yeah. Okay, so we'll try to schedule a caucus to follow the first council meeting in October.
Is there any other discussion? Thank you very much, Charlie. We don't have any further business on the agenda. Anything else from councilman?
I would just like to point out that Dennis did send out the timeline on the Malawi sister city. He was going to give a presentation, but perhaps we can do that.
I might come back and give an audio-visual
That's right.
2-minute moment about what it's like to see dancing in the African communities.
Sounds good. Thank you.
All right, see no further business. This meeting